In the Commonwealth Criminal Code, there are various crimes against humanity defined, and one of them is found in simply the arbitrary detention of innocent people. And tested against that, it seems to me that Peter Dutton is a criminal. And he's a criminal because he locks people up at his discretion. Not because the law says you must go to jail, therefore, but I can decide whether you go to jail, and I decide you will. It's a terrible thing to think that one of our senior ministers is in fact breaking our own criminal law by doing what he does.
I think in this context we absolutely have lost sight of the importance of liberty. I think a real challenge in Australia is that we don't have a Bill of Rights. I mean, I don't think this could happen. This kind of sustained cruelty to innocent people couldn't happen in Canada, couldn't happen in the UK, couldn't happen in New Zealand, because these are countries that have legal protection of basic human rights. All people, whoever they are, wherever they come from and however they come, deserve some basic minimum standards of humane treatment. Now, those basic minimum standards aren't protected in our law. The frightening thing about that is it means that on this issue where there is this sort of race to the bottom, there is no sort of bottom to this continuing descent. And that for me is a really terrifying concept.
And there's a tendency for us to think complacently, oh, well, we don't need to protect human rights because we respect them. Well, try living at the margins and see what that's like.
I mean, I think one thing that it's fair to say about Australians is we value fairness. And you see that reflected in lots of different parts of our society. I mean, every weekend in the AFL or the NRL, if someone wants to challenge a significant umpiring decision, there's rights of review. If you get a parking ticket, you can appeal it to court and challenge the issuing of that parking ticket. And I think those things, you know, they reflect something about our society, and that's that we believe that people shouldn't suffer bad consequences as the result of an incorrect or unfair decision. Now, I agree with that value. I think it's important. But what we see in the refugee and asylum seeker context is that that's out the window. Hugely significant decisions affecting people's most fundamental rights, their liberty, whether a child seeking asylum can apply for protection. These rights aren't protected through safe and accountable processes. They're left sort of at the discretion of one politician. And I think that's deeply problematic and counter to our ethos.
You have got a great deal of experience in the legal devices that have been used in this area, both by the refugee side of the equation and by the government especially. So what would you pick out as those bits of our laws aimed at refugees which give you concerns?
I think the real concern for me is that we are seeing basic rights, basic checks and balances completely stripped out of our laws and regulations on this issue. I mean, the violation of basic human rights is actually the rule rather than the exception here. Anyone who comes to Australia by boat and seeks safety here is subject to mandatory detention without any time limit. They are subject to mandatory deportation to Nauru or Manus. They're never allowed to apply for a visa in Australia unless the minister allows them to. So it is a system that is stripped of the basic checks and balances that we ordinarily see. The other real concern I have is the concentration of power into the hands of the immigration minister. It's central to the rule of law, really, that decisions, particularly important decisions, are made in a way that is fair and consistent and predictable and based on clear criteria. I mean, that's what a society based on the rule of law is. But what we have in this system is decisions of huge consequences to the lives of innocent people being left to the relatively unfettered discretion of one politician. And I think that is an absolute recipe for injustice.
And of course, the other necessary element for the rule of law is that the courts can supervise the way powers are exercised, and that is, in many instances, a practical impossibility in this system.
I mean, I think a government intending to act fairly, a government intending to act consistently with people's basic human rights doesn't remove the power of our courts to correct bad decisions. The nature of human rights is that there are things that attach to you that no government can take away from you. There are minimum standards you are entitled to just by virtue of the fact that you are human. And I think there is this great self-servingness of governments that just want complete freedom to take what they want from people, but we need to safeguard against it.